Survey has revealed that a large number of schools are not familiar with a circular issued by the Basic Education Department regulating school uniform purchasing. It states that school uniforms should be as generic as possible and should be obtainable from as many suppliers as possible. The Commission has engaged with the department and manufacturers to change the supply of school uniforms to make them more affordable. The circular also states that exclusivity should be limited to items that the school regards as necessary to obtain from pre-selected suppliers. Last year, the Commissioner initiated a complaint against a number of schools, as well as their school uniform manufacturers and suppliers for potential contraventions of the Competition Act. Parents complained that they could only buy from specifically identified suppliers without any other options being made available. The findings of the school uniform investigation will be released in the next few weeks. Sipho Ngwema, who is the head of the communication from the Competition Commission, joins us live from our Sipho studio in Cape Town now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Can you just tell us when will the results of the investigation be released?
Thank you, Ngwema, and good afternoon. The investigation is being finalized. It has now reached a very advanced stage, so we should be able to come in the next couple of weeks with the way forward in terms of the remedies that we'll be pronouncing on the investigation. Remember, we started it in January last year when we received more complaints after we had done some advocacy interacting with some schools, but we discovered much to our surprise that very many schools, in fact 30% of the schools were still involved in an anti-competitive conduct and therefore in breach of the law, but also very many of them claimed that they didn't get the circular from the department which specified all the issues that we went through, and therefore were not in compliance with that particular circular.
Do we have a profile of the kind of schools that say they didn't receive the circular and that are not complying with that circular? In as much as the conduct is widespread and it also involves government or public school. However, most of the schools that have contracts are either former Model C schools or private schools. And in terms of the survey that we did concurrent with the investigation, we discovered that more than 30% of the schools still have exclusive contracts. They didn't go through competitive bidding processes. In fact, one of the contracts dates back to 1974. And so you can imagine when parents are being forced to buy from one single supplier, which did not go through a competitive process, that parents will be subjected to higher prices and the quality may not be necessarily that which may be as a result of a competitive and a dynamic bidding process. Can you give us more information, if any, about the role of uniform suppliers in possible collusion with schools? I know you've just spoken to us about, for example, contracts from the 1970s that people have with suppliers.
There are a number of reasons why one would have these exclusive agreements, but also very many of them are informed by relationships between school governing bodies, principals and members of or stakeholders at schools and the suppliers and the distributors. So in most of the time, these relationships then end up with contracts, and some of them have come a long way and people have become more comfortable with their suppliers, but also some schools benefit from the pricing or pricing of the school uniform because more fat is added for school to have one benefit or the other in terms of fundraising. So this is why very many of them tend not to go to a fair and a bidding process, because those that they prefer or would have a relationship with may be beaten by other suppliers or manufacturers who may tender through a fair and a transparent bidding process.
Now, there's been a call for school uniforms to have as many suppliers as possible and for schools to have as plain uniform as possible so that it can be more affordable and to cut down on those exclusive items that can only be purchased from certain suppliers.
What of the argument that schools would perhaps make to say that they need to differentiate themselves from other schools, there need to be certain exclusive items in uniform?
We haven't had really any argument that we think it's sensible. However, very many would then claim culture, identity in terms of school uniform. However, we think that the circular that was issued by the department in May 2015, where it emphasized that school uniform must be generic, because many of these items you can get them at the retailers and the small enterprises or small businesses at a very fair price. However, when then they are made exclusive, you will find a situation where prices shoot up and parents are forced to pay higher prices. But we want to make sure that they comply with the law and the prices become reasonable for parents, but also quality is improved through the entry of other suppliers. We need to make sure that the barriers that are being introduced through these exclusive contracts are dealt with and they are removed.
Sipho Ngwema from the Competition Commission, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. It's time for a short break. When we come back, I'll have your international business news. Do stay with us.